Welcome to the first episode of Apple Finch Pudding, your gateway into the world of science. My co-host for today will be Pieter Leus, a physiotherapist at the local community health center, also one of my best friends, and he recently became a first-time dad of his son, Elias. Welcome, Pieter. How are you? Have you been able to get some sleep these last few nights?
Some sleep. This night was a rough night. Yeah. But we can manage.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's not even a month old yet, right?
No, tomorrow 3 weeks. It'll be 3 weeks tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm still at home right now. Starts work half of January again. So now all the attention can go to our son. So that's nice.
All right. Sounds good. Pieter is having some Wi-Fi trouble, but I will be joined today by John Treado, also known as Jack, a PhD candidate in mechanical engineering and material sciences at Yale University. Besides being a PhD candidate, Jack also found time to co-found the Yale Soft Matter Journal Club. And as if that wasn't enough, Jack also did an internship before his PhD at the internationally acclaimed Particle Accelerator located at CERN in Switzerland. Jack, thank you for willing to join us. How are you?
I'm good, Jeroen. Thanks for having me.
Oh, glad to have you. My first question for you, what is your favorite science joke or science fact is also possible? Do you have one?
I do, and if it's all right, I kind of want to do two because I was split between, I'm sort of split between my two favorites.
Yeah, no problem.
So my first favorite science joke is the following. Bartender says, "We don't serve faster than light particles here," and a tachyon walks into the bar. Laughter.
Yeah, so, I think it's a really specific joke to physics.
That's a very specific physics joke. Yeah, so a tachyon is a hypothetical particle that can travel faster than light.
Okay.
And there's a result in special relativity that if something was allowed to travel faster than light, it would violate causality, and you would get all these weird paradoxes. So that's a causality joke.
Okay. Okay.
But I like it because it's so anti a joke.
That it went right over my head though. But
yeah. Oh, it's niche for sure. But my second favorite joke, which is also not funny because it's a science joke. This was told to me by a physics professor actually in my first year of physics during my bachelor's, which was there's a farmer who his cows keep getting sick. And there's a university down the road. So the university sends their top biologist, their top chemist, and their top physicist to see if they can figure out his problem. And so the biologist says, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to dress down the cows. We're going to look at their physiology. We're going to check out their tissues. We're going to do samples of their organs. We're going to look at their DNA. We're going to do genetics testing. We're going to look at all of these things. And then we're going to make a complete picture using all of the biological tests that we can do on the cows to sort of try and figure out what's wrong with them. But then the chemist says, no, that's not going to work. We have to go deeper. We have to go and look at the chemical structure of their bile. We have to do chemical testing. We have to do mass spectrometry. We have to look at all of the different chemicals in the cow, and that's going to give us the most complete picture of why they're sick. And then the physicist says, no, this is all incorrect. What we have to do is we have to develop a model. And luckily, I've developed the perfect model of the cow in order to figure out why they're sick and to heal them. And everyone says, okay, what's your model? And the physicist goes, great, this is so great. Let's do my thing. So he gets out his chalkboard and he says, okay, first, assume the cow is a sphere. And that's the punchline.
Okay. And that's actually a good one.
Yeah, and I think it's great because it's the most self-awareness that you'll hear from physicists because and you'll hear this at conferences too. People will be like, yes, this model is kind of the spherical cow, but whatever. And I think it gets at something deep in the heart of physics, which is that it's that line, all models are wrong, some models are useful. That is physics at its deepest core, and I think that joke sort of references that. So that's the one joke that you'll hear like used professionally. People love that joke, so that's why it's my favorite.
Yeah, I also have the feeling that they say like it's a sphere or it only works in a vacuum.
Exactly, it only works in the vacuum. It's a sphere. You have to, it's homogeneous. There's constant something is constant, which is, you're treating something constant that's not constant. It's you like forget about every detail except the detail you think is important, and that's what physics is at its core, is forgetting about everything else except the important stuff.
Well, I actually really like that joke. I also have one horrible joke. I don't know why, but I really love it. So you have a biologist, a chemist, and a statistician, and they go hunting. And they see a deer. And the biologist is like, okay, fine, we're gonna try. And he shoots, and 1 meter to the left. Oh shit! And the deer runs off, but then it stands still again. And the chemist is like, okay, I'm gonna try again. Okay, it's my turn. He shoots 1 meter to the right. Ah shit! And the statistician calls, yes, we got it.
I love that joke. That's the perfect, because that's like the core of statistics. It's just like you sample and then you get a mean, but you haven't sampled that much. So that is, yeah, I was thinking about using that one, but I decided on the other ones. But that's a great
I'm glad you didn't. I only prepared one. So
oh yeah, okay, good. I didn't steal your thunder then.
Okay, so your joke already showed us you're clearly a physicist, but you have a lot of branches in physics. You have mechanics, you have photonics. What are you doing, and what branch are you working? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so when I was in undergraduate, you're sort of presented with all these different options. You start to see that the field has many distinct subtypes. There's particle physics, there's photonics, there's really cold atoms, there's astrophysics. But what I really liked was broadly now called condensed matter. Which is the study of the phases and properties of matter and materials. Condensed matter is very broad in and of itself. So there's the study of how electrons flow in metals. There's the study of how different materials change phase. So like how water freezes, that's condensed matter. But my sub area of physics is often referred to as soft condensed matter. So I'm really interested in the material and matter properties of soft things, which is exactly what it sounds like. So materials that are squishy. So things like foams, shaving cream, emulsions like mayonnaise or peanut butter is also an emulsion. This is basically the physics of food. And the reason that I think these materials are interesting is because they often, challenge our understanding of phases. So, you learn in grade school that there are 3 phases of matter. There's solids, liquids, and gases, but soft materials often somehow live between phases. So like mayonnaise, you can scoop it and spread it, but if you let it sit on a table, it's not going to flow. It's going to stay in a pile. And so that's kind of like a solid and a liquid at the same time.
Is that something like non-Newtonian fluids or something? Or
yeah, right, exactly. So non-Newtonian fluid is a type of soft matter. And non-Newtonian just means that in normal fluids, so Newtonian fluids, the flow rate is proportional to how fast you push the fluid, which we refer to as the strain rate. And non-Newtonian fluids, the flow rate is not directly proportional to the strain rate. You could have some fluids that you push really, 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 you try to strain really fast, but it doesn't flow, and then it'll like flow really quickly. Or it maybe flows way faster, even though you're not stirring that fast. So that type of behavior you'll get when you basically mix different materials together. So like if you put cornstarch in water, and so this is, if you've ever seen videos of people like walking on oobleck, it's called oobleck sometimes, and people will like be able to walk on fluid, but then people also be able to swim in it. That is a prototypical non-Newtonian fluid.
If you hit it really hard, then it comes like solid. When if you stand still on it, you will sink in it, right?
Exactly right. So you can run on it, but you can't like walk on it. And yeah, so that's exactly right. And you get that by just mixing cornstarch into water. So if you have cornstarch in your kitchen, you just pour it into a little bit of water. What you'll notice is if you stir it slowly, and my cooks do this all the time, if you stir it slowly, you'll be able to basically have, it'll be like honey. But if you stir it really fast, you'll notice that it's like kind of trying to stir into sand or something.
Is there an easy way to explain why that is happening, or not really?
This is a very active area of research. So and I hope if anybody who studies non-Brownian suspensions and things like cornstarch and water mixtures, if they're listening, I'm sorry if I butcher this, but basically what people are trying to understand is so the cornstarch grains are immersed in water. And you only get this non-Newtonian behavior when the cornstarch grains are really densely packed. So when there are a lot of cornstarch grains per unit volume of water. And so I think what is basically understood is that the corn grains are getting stuck. They can't, when there's lots of open room for them, if you try to stir it, they're just going to be able to flow past each other. But if there are too many of them, they start to bump into each other. And that bumping into each other, sort of at the macro scale is the thing that allows you to sort of walk on it, is that locally the cornstarch grains can't move. Why that happens though, is it because they're getting stuck together? Is it because there are, little liquid bridges between each particle that keep them trapped? The specifics I think is not understood, but it's basically because the cornstarch grains get jammed and they can't flow.
Okay. Well, that's also really interesting. So it's not 100% clear why it is happening, right?
Yeah. So this is the people know that the cornstarch grains are doing something, but what is not clear is exactly how, to get to the real bit mystery of like exactly how the cornstarch grains are interacting and what interactions are causing them to get stuck. That is not currently known. And this is, I think, this is one of the reasons I really like soft condensed matter, because all the materials are stuff you can find in your kitchen.
Your mayonnaise, your peanut butter.
Exactly. Yeah. All your spreads. And it's often referred to as the science of the everyday. So I'm in Connecticut, and Connecticut just had a huge snowstorm. So we have about 8 inches of snow outside. Snow is also a classic soft condensed matter because, things like snow or sand, gravel, they pile and they can flow, but they're made up of solid objects. And for example, on snow, you can walk on it. You can walk, you're not always just going to sink to the bottom. It's eventually going to get compacted enough that it's basically a solid. And so these are all materials that we have lots of everyday experience with. And so we might think that they're simple, but they're actually quite complex.
That's really cool. Okay, so you explained you work on soft matter physics. And what do you do exactly? So you have a lot of work that is possible in soft matter physics, but what is your research?
Right. So, there's lots of different soft materials, but in my view, I think the most interesting soft material is us. So people are squishy.
People. Okay. So we're soft materials.
We are soft materials. We are living, breathing, evolving soft materials, all of biology. And so this is how I sort of got into biological physics, which is the physics of living systems, because I think there's a nice sort of interface between the physics of soft, squishy things that are sort of liquid, sort of solid, and lots of different problems in biology. And in particular, I'm most interested in the physics of collections of cells that make up tissues. So I like studying squishy collections of cells and how they come together to give tissue their various mechanical and structural properties.
And are you then talking about tissues in petri dishes or in complete organisms?
I think both are cool. The great thing about physics is physics has a level of abstraction to it. So when you study models of things, you really can study anything because you're not studying anything in particular. So what I do in my day-to-day is I actually build computational models of collections of cells. And because I'm doing computational models and not studying things specifically, we can sort of study abstract general properties of any collection of cells.
Okay.
And so they could be in a petri dish. There are lots of interesting things that cells do in petri dishes, but also if it's in a living organism, what we call in vivo.
Okay. So you're working actually on the models to help other scientists to understand more clearly what is happening in tissue in vivo?
That's right, because so I'm working on the spherical cow. The models that we develop don't actually directly correspond to anything in particular. But what we do is we work with experimental scientists who actually do work with real things, and our models will help inform and explain things that are observed in experiments, and their experiments will then also help inform what models we should work on.
Okay. And when you say models, because you have a lot of different types of models, you have models that are just equations and numbers, but you also have 3D renderings and stuff. What is it you're focusing on? A mixture of both, or?
Right. Yeah. So the models that we work on, they sort of live. Yeah. So you sort of, and I think your point is totally correct. When you think about the vast panoply of different types of models that you can work on, some are pure just equations, and the result of the solving the equation is somehow the model. And then also you can get very specific models that you see in computer graphics, and 3D renderings that are hyper realistic. We're sort of somewhere in the middle. So we have a decent amount of abstraction to our model, but we also sort of try to contain some realistic specificity in the models we construct. And the type of modeling that I do, this is some technical jargon for you, is called molecular dynamics.
Okay. That's something you'll have to explain.
Yeah, right. So it's not a very good name because we don't really model molecules.
Yeah, that's a horrible name then.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Find something new, Jack. Find a new name.
Yeah, sometimes it's called discrete element modeling, but we call it molecular dynamics, unfortunately. And so what molecular dynamics is basically when you, in the computer, you somehow model the dynamics. So dynamics in physics just means the time evolution. So how things evolve and move in space and time. You model many discrete objects collectively interacting. So these techniques to basically model many things interacting at a given time, they were first developed to study molecular systems. So like how a bunch of water molecules in a, I have a water bottle here filled with water. This has something like 10 to the 23 water molecules all bumping into each other and binding and unbinding. And so let's say we wanted to get some microscope in my bottle of water, and we wanted to see all the molecules interacting and bouncing around. Now that's impossible in reality. You can't get a movie of the water molecules because, no camera is small enough. No camera exists that could possibly see all those fast interactions.
The resolution isn't high enough.
Exactly. So and it's not, the time resolution is also not. These interactions are very fast. But let's say we wanted to know, like, when water molecules are bumping into each other, what are the conditions in the between the water molecules that allows them to like freeze into ice, for example. And so what you can do in a computer is you can actually tell the computer to basically keep track of like millions of water molecules and also keep track of how they all interact. And you can simulate all of these water molecules bumping around and interacting with each other. There's some limitations because computers aren't perfect, but you can start to get at the resolution of all these water molecules bumping around and interacting. And you can make things like that start to look like movies of these water molecules, and you can use these simulations to learn something about the real system. So the techniques in order to do that is called molecular dynamics. We do that not with water molecules, but with cells. So we have computer simulations of many cells that are all bumping around and interacting, and we use the techniques developed for things like water molecules, but we apply them to biological systems like tissues filled with cells.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm also thinking every model you have to validate with measurements. I can imagine that you are able to do some measurements on cells, but on water molecules must be a different kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. The simulations we do are just that. They're just simulations. They're not real. And so an important part is we have, let's say with the water molecule example, I have some water molecules bumping around. How do I validate that the simulation is real? Well, in my simulation, I'll have something like a temperature. and I can change the temperature to whatever I want in the computer, do my water molecules freeze at 0 degrees Celsius? If they do, then my simulation probably has some realistic components to it. And so we do the same thing in our simulations of cells. What we'll do is we'll construct the model, we'll run some simulations, and then we'll try to poke and prod the model and get some measurements of what's happening in the simulation. And then we'll collaborate with some experimentalists and say, do the same thing to the real system. Do they behave similarly? And if they do, then we can say, oh, the ingredients that we put into our model, they must be somehow realistic.
Yeah. So actually, the thing that you're modeling and you're measuring are different variables, and you're trying to see if I change one parameter like temperature, does the cell shape, for example, or how they connect change as well?
Yeah, exactly. The stuff that I do in my simulations is, I change something and I just see if my simulation responds to that change in the same way that an experimental system would respond. It's all about trying to get your simulation to somehow recapitulate what is seen in experiments. And that's really important because the simulations that we construct lack, I'd say, the vast majority of the actual complexity of a real system. So this gets back to my spherical cow joke. The models that we create lack a lot of detail that is included in reality. So back to the water bottle example, water molecules are incredibly complicated molecules, even though it's just a oxygen and 2 hydrogens. Now, oxygen and 2 hydrogens, when you put them in a molecule, like the molecule can have different shapes, the way that the hydrogens interact with each other and other hydrogens in your beaker of water. Those are quite complicated. People will model them and they'll neglect a lot of that specificity. So they won't model all of the complex quantum physics and chemistry of actual hydrogen atoms. They'll maybe pretend like they're little spherical balls that want to slightly attract each other. But if you can get a very simple simulation to somehow recapitulate something real, like the freezing temperature of water, that sort of tells you, A, I have a simulation of water, so I can study water now. And B, apparently this thing that I'm studying, like the freezing temperature of water, is not so dependent on all of the complex microscopic chemistry and quantum physics of hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms. It's somehow some collective thing of all of them interacting together in this simpler way that is contributing to the physical observation. And so simple models that recapitulate experiments, it tells you what is the relevant physics for some observation. And so that's why we use simple models, because we're trying to get at what's the relevant physics. Even though we know we're neglecting real stuff, we're just trying to boil it down to its essentials.
Peter.
Hey, Peter.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Maybe some small recap of what we discussed already, Jack?
Right. I am a soft condensed matter physicist. So I study squishy things, like basically anything in your pantry. So mayonnaise, et cetera. But I also study the most important squishy thing, in my opinion, which is us, biological systems, life. Life is squishy, basically, except for trees.
Don't talk down on trees, Jack.
No, I love trees, and that's why I really like trees because you're a tree specialist, right?
Well, I'm an ecophysiologist, and I focus on tree functioning. So,
but trees are it's hard. It's always hard for me to I'm learning about, I'm a physicist, so I'm learning about biology every time I do it, and then I think about trees, and I'm like, well, how's that happen? Like, I would love to hear about the very squishy versus non-squishy things that are happening in trees. I still don't know why trees are stiff, but the way I study all of these different things is that I do computational simulations. So I will try to recreate some physical system in my computer and then work with experimentalists to see if my simulation is correct, but then also to help their experiments, guide the experimental observations that they want to make.
Okay, sounds interesting.
Yeah. Actually, as a result of your recap, I'm also thinking, so you say you study cells and squishy things, but do you focus on animals or on plants or both?
That's a great question. So I have two answers to that, and because I sort of don't study either, and this I think gets back to the spherical cow thing. Peter, you missed a really great joke about spherical cows that Jeroen will have to tell you later.
Also, we have to listen to Peter's joke later.
Oh, right, yeah, you have
Right.
to. We can't let you leave without the joke. But because I'm doing computational simulations, and because physics sometimes abstracts, you sort of take a step back from a lot of specificity to try to learn general things. I study the abstraction of a cell more than the cell, and so I can kind of study both plants and animals. That being said, so in some sense I'm studying neither, but in another sense I have worked on projects that have studied both. So I've worked on tumor cells invading breast tissue. I've worked on the cells in developing zebrafish embryos, and I've also studied plants. So I like it all, and this gets back to the spherical cow thing. You can kind of study everything when you do physics because you're studying nothing. So I've been very fortunate in my PhD. I've been able to work on a lot of things.
Yeah, it seems to be a broad field.
Totally. It's at the biological physics has its fingers in many pies is an expression we have in English. So it's very broad. You can work on anything.
Right.
Before we forget, Peter, what is your joke?
My joke. Well, I was going to ask you something more about the title. What is for you the difference between an apple and a finch?
The difference between an apple and a finch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of one. It's just like they're so similar. One has feathers.
Yeah, for you they're both spheres, right?
Right. Actually, to me they're the same. So
yeah, the reason I was wondering is because personally I wouldn't really make pudding out of finches, but I would out of apples. So yeah.
Okay, I get it.
That's actually a funny joke.
Yeah.
My joke was way less funny than that.
He had two jokes. The first one went straight over my head. The second one was really funny. That was the spherical one. But the name apple finch pudding is actually coming from the apple of Newton's apple, finch of Darwin's finches. And pudding is actually from plum pudding model by Thomson. And we just combined those in one single dish, I guess.
And it's nice because you got physics, biology, and chemistry in there in one beautiful soup. The sociologists are probably a little bit mad about that, but that's okay.
I don't really have mathematics there as well, but physics and mathematics, it's not the same, but you have some overlap, right?
They're very similar. Don't let a mathematician hear that, by the way. They'll get very angry, but they're very similar. I mean, Newton was a mathematician, so
yeah, that's true.
That counts for two.
Okay.
Oh. If you ask a mathematician, they'll say Newton was a mathematician, and if you ask a physicist, they'll say Newton was a physicist. But Newton was a physicist. He was a bit of a polymath.
That's the thing, right? Now every scientist is studying one really small specific thing, and in those days, a scientist knew something of everything.
Well, I one time heard so somebody in high school, like a high school teacher, told me this, and it's always stuck with me, and I have no idea how to actually know where this comes from, but he basically said, so like if you look at knowledge, it used to be like if you were a scientist, you did everything. Basically, everybody was a polymath because everybody worked on everything all the time, and then it slowly starts to specialize until you get to like the 20s, and then science becomes hyper specialized, especially when you get to like molecular biology and everyone's looking at one individual protein, etc. But then it gets very, very specialized. But now it's starting to broaden again. Because interdisciplinary things are very, in vogue. So like I'm interdisciplinary, but apparently this isn't just biological physics. It's like everything's becoming interdisciplinary. So we're coming back out again. I mean, it's still specialized, but things are broadening every day. Yeah,
but I think there's a lot of interesting things to find out by working interdisciplinary, because when you're so specific, you know a lot about such a small part of science that you really don't know anything about all the rest.
You're losing the overview and the links between the different parts.
That's true.
Because everything's connected,
We're getting metaphysical right now.
I think this is like one of my favorite topics is the, basically, meta science. So thinking about how the science of science, like everything is connected. Like everything I do, I do computational simulations. That requires programming. So that's computer science basically. But then also the computer science of like thinking how to make algorithms efficient. I use lots of mathematics. I study biological systems. I'm a physicist. I'm in a mechanical engineering department. You can't have anything. And like, if you study anything, you're using the tool developed by some other field. So,
and you are soft matter yourself, so you're a part of your own research.
and I am actually soft matter. That's a great point.
So is pudding.
Pudding is the best soft matter.
You should start studying pudding.
I know. Yeah, I should. I should start. Well, maybe I should just make it and eat it. That'd be even better.
As long as there's no finches in it, I'm with it.
I'll put a little bit of finch in there. Just little drop of sparrow. Never hurt anybody.
Yeah, it has a nice crunch to it, like the beak or something. Yeah.
Little bones, a little bit of bones. Never hurt anybody. You can make bone jelly. There's lots of collagen in bones.
They use it for a lot of candies, right?
Yeah, I think like basically if you had gelatin in like the 1800s, like in London or something, there'd be some bone broth from there. You basically get all that nice gelatinous goop from bones.
Yeah, and also for the coloration of candy, they need especially for red, I think they need ground lice to
really still
to get the color. Yeah.
Ground lice, like you mean like hair lice?
Not specifically hair lice, but a type of lice. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know ancient Greeks and stuff, they made colorings from all types of animals or insects or plants or whatever. But I didn't know they still use those.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever had you guys have ever had ramen, like really good Japanese ramen? If you take it home and you let it sit in your fridge, you are going to get basically the most perfect Jello sitting right at the top, because ramen has lots of fat in it, and it just all will just phase separate to the top of your container, and you can like scoop it out. So it's a little gross, but that's what makes ramen so good, is all that fat. So
you actually eat like spoons of fat?
Well, you put it in the microwave and then it remixes and then it's delicious again. No,
because you say like you can spoon it out. I was like, you spoon it out and eat the fat or something?
Maybe a little bit, no, I would not do that. I would reheat it, but
yeah, I don't trust you, Jack. You would definitely eat the fat.
I'll take a little pinky.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the next question.
Yeah, we're getting a little off topic here, but I'm happy to talk about bone jelly for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's also fine if you want. It's also science, right?
It's all science, baby.
So you're near the end of your PhD research.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to stay in academia? And why do you or don't you?
That's a great question. I do. So I am currently in the wonderful stage of my life where I'm looking for a job, which we all know is a very fun endeavor. But yeah, I would like to stay in academia. That was a decision that I sort of mulled over in my head for a long time, because on the one hand, I really like science and I really like research. But on the other hand, academia is really hard. There's fewer jobs than I might like. And also there's lots of cool stuff in industry. Like I could pivot and I could do something more applied. I could work on a product. I could work for a nonprofit. I could work in science policy and advocate for science. But I think I stuck with academia because one, I really like intellectual freedom, and academia seems like a way to get that. But I also really like teaching. So I think it's great that you guys are doing this podcast, because I think communicating about science and teaching somebody something new about science that they never heard before, I think is a very rewarding endeavor. So because I like research and I like teaching enough, I decided to stay in academia. So I'm looking for a postdoc.
Yeah.
As of now.
No, thank you also for the compliment. We're really happy that you're willing to talk about your research here. But I do get it. I was really also thinking about, do I want to stay in academia or don't I? And I want to do research, but most of the time I want to do it because I want to know how it works and it's fun. And in the industry, if it works, it's fine. You don't need to know why. Make it work.
Yeah. It's kind of like the end is the journey. Like you're really just trying to get somewhere, but in research, the journey is the goal, it's more of the exploration than actually getting somewhere.
That's almost a Brandon Sanderson quote from Stormlight Archives.
Oh, That's me. That's my pseudonym. I'm Brandon. No, I'm just kidding. I've never heard of that before, but that's cool.
Amazing fantasy. It's what was the quote? Journey before destination.
I agree. At least that's totally my man after my own heart.
So what you like most about academia is actually that the intellectual freedom.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's kind of, it's totally incorrect to say that there's infinite intellectual freedom. I mean, you always are beholden to something. Like, now I'm beholden to the projects that I was given for my PhD. For my next job, it'll be the project that I've been given to as my, by my, potential postdoctoral advisor. You always need to be relevant. You can't just work on anything. It needs to have, there needs to be some eventual benefit to society, I think. And then I guess eventually, the dream is to become, faculty somewhere. Then you're beholden to what the government will give you money to do. So it's not pure freedom, but I think it's freer. There's a lot more freedom than you get potentially in like an industry job. And that's not totally true. Like I've had people in industry tell me that there's lots of really rich, rewarding intellectual experiences that you could have working for a company. But, academia does seem to have, the ability to, I would like to have my own lab and to like work on my own projects and like, explore my own ideas. That does sound very exciting to me.
I totally understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree though. Like I said, it's different in industry, but you have other benefits. Let's put it like that. In academia, we're often limited by funds.
Yeah, which is not always the best. And that is, I think, a big stressor in a lot of academics' lives is this sort of constant search for funding. But I mean, I'm not. You got to get paid to give something. You only get money if you deliver. And I think what we do is super important and relevant. And it basically is, I think science has given the world modernity. We have basically scientists have constructed the world, but it's like you do something and then it like has an impact 50 years later, and it's not you who's doing the impact. It's like somebody who read your paper. So it's it's often it's hard to, I think convince people all the time that is why it's relevant to fund basic research. But I mean, I think that's why there's funding, is because that's true.
Yeah, because I heard somewhere, I don't know the exact numbers, but it was about between 80 and 90% of fundamental research has no real applications, but the 10 to 20% that do far outweigh the costs of those 80% that don't have an application.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. And there's even like, if you think about like the people who invent the things in our lives that have, made our lives so different, like, cell phones, for example.
Or this recording.
Or yeah, the thing that we're talking on right now, the internet, the recording device, the computer, software engineers. All of that stuff was invented by people who were taught basic research, and they maybe were basic researchers and they moved into more, they used what they were studying and they, then brought that to industry, or they read the work of people who were doing basic research. And like, there's kind of like this flow of information that like, there's the mathematicians who are working on, insane hyperbolic geometry problems that no one ever really care about. And then it all sort of flows down until you get to like technology. And then that's modernity. So yeah, I think it's difficult, I think, to convince people of it sometimes because it's not always clear. And I personally think we don't really understand how knowledge works. We know that it's shared, but like you can't trace out the exact lineage of every idea.
It's also like the hard thing when you like to try transfer knowledge, you're always losing information in the transfer. Like if you're reading a paper, it's not the same as knowing what the person is doing when he's actually doing it. You're also always losing some information that might be important, but you don't really know.
And that makes it really hard to be like, oh, like, the cell phone was invented because, 50 years ago, this electrical engineering researcher was studying, this particular thing about this transistor. Like, because like knowledge transfer is a messy, very human endeavor.
Do you know Touchpads? That was invented in CERN.
Oh, really?
That's something I heard as well, so I hope it's correct. But they told me that they had like too many buttons, so they weren't able to probably work. And so they make the touchpad that they could swipe with and have different buttons. And you had
Wow.
actually the touchpad was invented at CERN, but it took like, I don't know, almost a decade before it got to the regular society.
Well, the internet was invented at CERN too.
Really? Everything's invented in CERN.
Everything was invented at CERN, basically. Yeah, the World Wide Web was initially a document sharing service that CERN developed, that this particular scientist at CERN developed, so that they could share data between disjoint places. And so whenever people are like, "Oh, why do we spend all this money on CERN?" It's like, maybe it's a good point. Maybe it's hard to really see the reason for studying why what the Higgs boson is. But they gave us the internet. I mean, come on, that's like, it was a $20 billion investment that gave us like a $15 trillion thing. So
yeah, that's already insane.
Yeah, it already paid for itself.
Which is now the best way to share knowledge, because we're talking about losing knowledge, but the internet, I think, is the best way to share the knowledge we have and to make everything available to everyone.
I mean, look at us. You guys are in Belgium. I'm in Connecticut. Come on.
But the internet is also a really hard one when you're talking about sharing knowledge. If you want, you can find a lot of wrong information. Let's put it like that.
Unfortunately, it's a very powerful tool, and tools can be used and misused.
Yeah, it works both ways.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. When you were a kid, did you also want to become a scientist, or did you want to become something else?
Oh, that's a great question. So my parents are both academics. So my dad's a chemist and my mom's an economist. So I kind of did, not for any deep reason, but just because I like my parents and I liked what they did, and they seemed, and it's also like I remember I was in like third grade and I was like, what'd your parents do their PhD in? Like I had this total bubble, and they're like, what are you talking about? My parents didn't do a PhD. Like no one does a PhD. And I sort of was insulated in this environment where I sort of thought everybody was a scientist. So that I think I'm sort of biased in that way. But I will say I was a super curious kid. I didn't know that I wanted to be a scientist, but I was obsessed when I was a kid with sharks.
With sharks?
Yeah, I'm still obsessed, actually. I love sharks. I have shark posters in my room at home. I wish I had more shark stuff here.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's why you removed the shark poster when we started the recording. You can leave it up. You can leave it up, it's fine.
My huge Jaws movie poster, I was embarrassed about that. No, I mean, I wish I had shark stuff in here, but I love sharks, and I love great white sharks for no reason.
Yeah, I was going to ask why great white sharks, but yeah, for no reason.
They're the biggest shark. Like I've never been able to figure this out. Like I love them. Every fall, my girlfriend always gives me crap about this. Cape Cod, shark season in Cape Cod is always in the fall, and there are great whites that are just like patrolling the beaches, and you can't swim, and there are shark attacks, and it's like this crazy time in Cape Cod, which is in Massachusetts, which is nearby. I have this app that tells me whenever there's a shark sighting. And whenever there's a shark sighting, I see where it is on the map. And I really want to go to Cape Cod and spend like a week at Woods Hole going around with all the shark scientists, just following them around and tagging them and like learning about how old they are and like where they migrate to. I just love it.
I really hear the passion in your voice when you're talking about the sharks.
I'm obsessed with sharks. I love sharks, and I could tell you why I'm interested in physics. Like, I think it's like this important science. Like, I like the abstract thinking. I cannot tell you why I love sharks.
They're also soft matter, though.
Oh well, everything's soft matter. I mean, but yes, they're a phenomenal soft matter example because they don't have bones; they just have cartilage.
What?
Yeah, so sharks aren't bony. They're cartilaginous.
I didn't know that. I thought they had bones.
No, it's all cartilage. So it's basically, I mean, we have cartilage too. We have, our nose is cartilage, but like imagine all of their structural, their skeleton, they have a skeleton of cartilage. They don't have bones.
And their teeth, are those cartilage too, or?
Oh, that's a good question. People are always like, oh, they're not bony, but the teeth must be bone. I don't know about that.
Because cartilage is not as hard as bone, so I would think that the teeth should be bony.
Yeah, the teeth do seem like bones. So and maybe a shark scientist would be like, well, there's maybe some bone. There's always specificity, but like I do know that sharks belong to the family of fish there's bony fish, and then there's the shark family, and so there's like sharks and stingrays and skates and all of those like flatfish are closely related to sharks because none of them have bones.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I mean, this is what I was learning. I would every like Tuesday, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I'd tell my mom like we have to go to the Carnegie Library, which is the library system in Pittsburgh. And I'd go to the kids section and I would just take out all the shark books and I would just like stare at them. I'd memorize. I have all these shark facts in my head. And so just get back to your question of did I want to be a scientist? Like that strikes me as a very pro science thing. Like I was always really curious. I just wanted to know everything there was to know about sharks. I still do. So I think because I had that going on, I think that sort of made me want to be a scientist because like, you learn, then you go to college and people start talking about, there's this job where you get to be curious. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. So.
Well, but it is weird that you didn't start studying sharks.
Oh, yeah. So this is really funny. My first real science class was like my first year of high school. I had this biology course and I was like, oh man, like I love sharks. I want to become a marine biologist. So obviously I have to learn biology. And I took the bio course and I hated it. Like I hated it. It was the worst course. It was my least favorite course in high school. I did not like biology. The teacher of the course was like famous in Pittsburgh because he's like one of the best high school science teachers on like the planet. He's this really animated, awesome guy. Shout out to Mark Krotek. And I just couldn't get into it. It was just like I didn't like it. And I didn't like the pipetting. I didn't like how you had to like pipette it onto a plate and then like spin the plate and like I'd always spin it wrong and I would always mix up my there's the dilution thing where you have to go from like 10th to 100th. I could never do that. Now I'm studying and so then I was like, well, I hate bio, so I decided, and my dad was a chemist and you can't do what your parents did, so I did physics. And and then I realized I was like, no, I actually really like biology. I just don't like pipetting. So biological physics is my back door into biology. So I'm working my way back, and I think in like 10 years I'll be studying sharks. So that's my goal. Why you became a botanist, Jeroen?
Well, actually, my dad was also really into plants and gardening and stuff. And my grandfather was a farmer. It just felt natural to stay close to plants. I moved to trees, though. None of them were interested in trees. I am.
Because you can't do what your dad did. You have to do something different. So he was a gardener, but I studied trees. Come on, hey, different.
Yeah, totally different. You can't compare it.
Yeah, no, there's nothing similar between plants and trees, other than the fact that trees are plants.
It's something weird. I don't know why, but a lot of people think you have animals, you have plants, and you have trees. Trees are plants.
Trees are plants. I guess it's because of the wood, like the bark. It's so funny that you say that because like now that I think about it, I do kind of put trees into a different box. I think it's because like trees are such like I grew up in Pennsylvania, which is like basically 90% of the state is just a forest. It's basically pure forest. It's like, the tree is such a deep rooted concept in like our, collective cultural understanding of the world. Like trees were like the first gods because you're like they're everywhere. And we burn them for wood. But they also house like all of the demons of humanity. They all live in the forest, and so I think like trees are like this special thing because our lives are and also they make atmosphere. They like are the reason that we're alive.
Other plants do that as well, though.
Oh yeah, right. I always forget that. Good point.
That's why I have one here.
Just to have a little bit of it's actually I'm running out of oxygen. I should plant a bush.
Right next to your shark poster.
Yeah, yeah, my shark poster, and then I have my bush that makes all my oxygen.
Did you see one, a great white shark in real life?
No, I've never seen one in real life. No, I've never.
Okay.
Yeah, which is like my least favorite fact about myself.
How is that possible, Jack?
I know, but the thing is, so great whites, they can't keep them in captivity. Whenever they try to put them in aquariums, they die. And I've only really ever seen sharks in aquariums. So, because they're like empowered, and this is one of the reasons why they're so mysterious and spooky is because they're very hard to keep in captivity. So like I've seen plenty of sharks, like sand tigers and nurse sharks that you see in your local aquarium, but I've never seen a great white.
Time to book a trip to Cape Cod.
I know, and shark season is over now, but there's really good sharks in California and Mexico and South Africa, so I could always just book a plane ticket.
Yeah, you can go everywhere and find sharks, apparently.
All right, exactly.
So we talked about how becoming a scientist was actually quite natural for you because your parents are scientists as well. But Imagine if you weren't a scientist, what would you be? Did you have a backup plan or something?
That's such a good question. Well, the thing is, I would be a different form of scientist. I would be I'm a physicist, but I would be a marine biologist if I wasn't a physicist. If I wasn't a marine biologist, I think I'd be a linguist. I think linguistics is awesome. If I wasn't like an academic, um, I have this dream of like owning a fishing boat in Alaska.
A fishing boat in Alaska.
Yeah, like my dream job, I think that's not academics. I think they're all bad career moves. I'd like to be being a professional DJ would be really cool.
One question for the fishing boat though, do they have sharks in Alaska?
Oh, you better believe it. They have they don't have great whites. They don't go that far north, but I think maybe in Alaska you start to get there are some you get a lot of basking sharks, I think, which are these big filter feeders. They're basically whales. There's some other sharks that are in the northern climes. There's this very famous shark called a Greenland shark. Have you ever heard of the Greenland shark?
No.
They live in the Arctic, basically. They like live under icebergs. But like there's an individual found recently that's 450 years old. Because the water is so cold, they like don't age.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can get these individuals. So I don't know if they have those in Alaska, but they would have them in Greenland.
Cryopreservation.
Exactly. But they're like still alive, which is crazy. And in Iceland, they eat them, but because of I don't know why this happens. They have high levels of mercury in their tissue. What they do is they take these sharks and they hang them in barns, and they basically let the shark rot. So it's just rotten shark. And then there's like this layer of like, deadly rotted flesh. And then they scrape it off. And then you have like this perfectly aged piece of shark meat. It doesn't sound very appetizing, but people will eat these sharks in Iceland. And so I imagine that there may be some similar sharks going on in Alaska.
So fermented meat, really?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which sounds pretty gross. I bet it's got a very complex flavor.
I've been to Iceland, but we haven't tried it.
You can get it in the grocery stores, apparently.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, it's like still a thing. And yeah, because I went as well, and I asked a waitress this, and she's like, yeah, you should try it. It's pretty crazy. It's apparently it's like what grandparents eat. It's like a kind of an older person thing.
It's a missed opportunity, Peter. You should have tried it.
I don't think I would have enjoyed it.
Yeah, there's something about it, but maybe it doesn't seem that appetizing.
Now that we're talking about what you would do, Peter, you're a physiotherapist. Yeah. If you were into academia, what would you do?
Whoa, what a difficult question. I think, especially because I'm very interested in the body and how the body functions, I guess it would be somewhere in that area. But what exactly, it's hard to say.
You can probably go in academia and physiotherapy, right? If you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Or medicine, something like that.
Yeah. At this point, I'm very interested in what can happen to the body and what is needed to heal certain problems. So I guess that would be very interesting for me also to do that in academia and to do research in how certain syndromes or certain problems can develop and how we can make it better and cope with it.
And Jack can model the squishy tissue you need, so that's perfect.
You kind of cheated though, because you basically took your current job, and you just turned it into academia. That's, come on. I mean,
yeah, but it's also what interests me. So
it is also, yeah, that's very fair. Actually, I think that I would also one thing that I think is kind of cool is like sports science, like people who study like your VO2 max and like basically like how to become like a superhuman who has like, has a resting heartbeat of like 30 BPM. I think that's really cool and like the most efficient way to work. So like I do a lot of cycling, and the professional cyclists will have sports doctors taking oxygen reading of their blood like every day for like a month, so they can like figure out how efficient they are as like a machine. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
I share your interest, Peter.
I think Peter would enjoy to do as well.
Yeah, so before studying for physiotherapist, I also studied sports sciences. So I have a master's degree in sports sciences too, and I found it very interesting. And I also thought about doing a PhD or doctorate, but I have to be honest with you, during my thesis, I felt like it wasn't really my calling.
Right. Yeah.
So it was a lot of desk work, a lot of looking for articles, reading articles, and yeah, a really slow process really for me. So that's why I didn't really go further into that area.
Academia has some very non-glamorous moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing I hate most about academia is the politics.
Oh, yeah.
But that's something you have in a lot of jobs. So
it's just a very particular brand of politics. I think my parents are academics, and my mom always has this thing whenever I'll complain about something. And her saying is, it's like academia, never have the problems been so big over something so small. And it's like, that's so to a T.
Just to be sure, we still love science, right?
Oh, yeah.
We sure do.
Well, though, actually, that were all my major questions. Just in general, if there's something that you want everyone to know or never forget.
Just because I started this, I do think that it's, this is kind of like my soapbox. And the thing is that sharks are the best. That's what my take-home message is. I love sharks, and you should remember that about me. No, I guess because this is for a general audience. I get a lot of, I've plenty of non-scientists in my life. I talk to them about my work all the time because I can never shut up. And one thing I think that sometimes gets missed about physics in general is the spherical cow joke that I taught that I gave in the beginning of the episode. I think that's that's exactly what physics is. It's the construction of the spherical cow. And my take-home message, I think, is when you hear about physicists doing something, that's what they're doing. Physics is this sort of construction of models that aren't really reality, but they somehow also inform us about reality. And I think that's a subtle point because, when I talk to my college friends, they're like, hey, have you split any atoms recently? And it's like, even if I was a particle physicist, the thing that they're interested in isn't necessarily the splitting of an atom. The thing that they're interested in is the laws of nature. And what I'm interested in is the laws of nature applied to living things. How do living things follow the laws of nature? Or how do the laws of nature inform the, function and evolution of living things? And so I think that's sometimes missed when people talk about physics, but I think it's an important point that physics is a little bit more abstract and it's a little bit focused more on modeling and background general thinking rather than something specific.
That's a really nice take-home message.
Thank you. It's my favorite. It's my favorite, fact about physics. So,
Pieter, do you have anything to add? A take-home message of your own?
Not really, but I would like to come back to an earlier question because you said I cheated. So I thought about it. Another thing I would like to study and explore more would be space. I think I'm very interested in everything that happens in outer space. So
astrophysics.
Yeah, very interesting.
That's a great answer.
Yeah,
you've totally redeemed yourself. That's
Thank
sweet.
you.
And because space is it's the final frontier. It's like everything else. Space is just everything else other than the planet Earth. That's totally cool. Do you have a favorite part of space?
My favorite part is that it's so immense, that it's so huge that we even can't comprehend how big it is. And the longer you think of it, the more abstract and the more crazy it seems.
Did you guys see the Event Horizon Telescope? The picture of the black hole?
Oh yeah.
What they said, because it's this array of radio telescopes, or I don't know whatever type of telescope they're using. It's this array of telescopes. They said that the telescope is so well resolved that it could take a photo of a quarter on the surface of the moon.
What?
With and it's not to be able to do that, you need a telescope dish the size of Earth. And what they did was they had a downsampled version of a telescope the size of Earth just because they had 6 parts of a telescope. I think that's mind-blowing. Yeah.
Wow.
That is mind-boggling. That's insane.
Yeah, because they have to take a photo of something that's so far away and so small relative to where we are.
Okay, that's a great fact, I think, to end this episode.
Shout out the EHT.
Okay, thank you for joining me today. Jack, Pieter, thank you for sharing the information. See you for next episode of Apple Finch Pudding.